Hello, everybody. Good morning. How are we doing? Happy Tuesday. My name is Jason Krutzky. It is a great pleasure to be with you here this morning. The markets are super strong as of late. And I have to admit, I had a wildly busy weekend. And yesterday was very busy here at work. So I haven't even really gotten to dig in to any of these charts here in a couple of days. I'm curious to know what's up, Mighty Soldier. How are you? I hope you're doing good. Good morning. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. It's great to see you here with us this morning. I haven't had any time to really dig into the chart, so I'm not really sure what's going on out there in the markets this week. It's just been super busy for me. So the first thing that I like to do whenever I am unsure of what's going on out there, one of the quickest, most efficient ways to see where the eyeballs are, for me anyway, is through our top traded lists. If you go to your watch list and you add a watch list and you come up here and you search top, we've got a bunch of top mentioned. These are all from Wall Street Bets. We've got top traded retail investors. So this is where I like to look, is the top traded retail investors. Now, oftentimes you're going to get the usual suspects. If we pick yesterday's watch list here, it's a lot of the usual suspects: Tesla, NVDA, SPY, Apple, AMD, QQQ, TQQQ, SQQQ, some indecision there, Amazon and Microsoft. So I like to go through these charts real quick just to kind of see where things are at. If these are the top traded, I want to know about it. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to spend a little bit of my morning just kind of like popping through these charts and having a look at things. I've got RSI up. I've got MACD up. I've got my volume by price anchored to around the all-time highs. It's going to vary on different names, so I'll have to kind of adjust it here and there on different names. But, just kind of want to see, okay, this is what everybody's trading, and this is what the most retail traders are trading, or these are the traders most traded by retail traders. These are the tickers most traded by retail traders. So I'd like to see kind of where they're at and what they're doing. Microsoft looking pretty interesting here, coming into those, August 2022 highs. Looks like they filled the gap just yesterday, actually. They filled, or no, 2 days ago, I'm sorry, Friday, they filled this gap that had been there since September. So that's kind of interesting. This seems like a relatively decent place for it to potentially pause. We can see it is trading above the point of control from the all-time high, anchor a VWAP there, and darn it, this VWAP is pretty much perfect, right? Been really nice resistance back in March of last year, back in August of last year, even in February of this year. And then finally it was able to gain, came back and tested, held a couple of times, and continues to make new highs. Is exactly what you want to see off of these anchored VWAPs from the all-time highs. Super important there. How are you guys doing this morning? Is everybody doing good? Where are you guys tuning in from? What are you trading? While I'm kind of looking through stuff, do feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Do feel free to, if you want to look at other tickers, I'm happy to do that. We go to Amazon here, anchored from the all-time high. That point of control is looking rough. That's way up there, 165. Let's anchor VWAP and see. VWAP at 130 or so, 132, 133. If this thing is able to continue to gain, it did make a higher low over the past couple of months. So maybe it's going to go try and make a new high. Let's see something here. I'm going to refresh my auto trends. Not exactly what I was looking for. So I'm kind of looking at this. All my strat traders out there, your broadening range line gets us up into that 124 area. Maybe at some point we see some move higher and we get, the anchored VWAP comes into this broadening range and we take new highs into this VWAP. That might be something that I might be looking for in the longer term. What's up, Omegam? Oh, how do we say this? Omega Millions. How's it going, man? Virginia, what's up? How's Virginia looking today? SPY, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Coin, Tesla. Yeah, half of those are here. Take a look at Tesla real quick. Tesla is so pretty. that inverted head and shoulders. If you guys were tuned in a couple weeks ago, we kind of were talking about this. I'm a price action guy for anybody who is not familiar with the style of trading that I do. But price action would kind of dictate, you gained this high here that brought us all the way down to the low. You kind of gained it over here. So when you test back to the low that brought us to the high that we gained, you would expect it to hold. So you got kind of an inverse head and shoulders thing going on. Nice, perfect support here. Also kind of coincided with your anchored VWAP from the lows in January. So a really nice spot to catch a bid for anybody who caught it. That 170 level was pretty primo. And now from the all-time highs, check out what we're doing today. We are trading, well, as of yesterday's close. Let's see where we're at today. Just adding after hours data and pre-market data. Looks like we're trading kind of right at it. We came right into the POC, point of control, from the all-time high. So this is where the most volume at price lives since the all-time high. And that's pretty interesting, right? 192 bucks. They tried to get above it here. They ended up failing, and now they're trying to get back above it again. This is a, like what Jake would talk about, the support resistance, the potential support resistance flip. It's going to be a really, really big spot right here at this 192, 193 level, kind of where that point of control is. You're gonna look for price to be supported by all of this volume that has occurred since those all-time highs. We're looking green. Good, Omega. Glad to hear that, man. Or ma'am. I don't know. So Amazon looking, or rather Tesla looking really interesting here. If you can hold that point of control, they did hold where they should have held here at this 170 spot. Interesting. I'm going to throw up the weekly here and take a look at the weekly. Kind of see this is your anchored VWAP from the COVID low. And you can see how that kind of coincided with that pullback too. It was a couple bucks higher, 179, but still an important spot, that anchored VWAP from the COVID low. I'm going to throw up an auto fib real quick. And let me refresh this as well. And they held that 0.382 and the 0.5. Okay, right on. So even more reason to think that price might hold there. Let's try a monthly fib. Yeah, that was the one I was looking for. So above, this is your spot to keep an eye on. 0.382 at 221. Looks like they rejected it initially, kind of right here. And I'm just using, I like to use these auto analysis tools because, sometimes you like to curve fit to what you want to see. And so the auto analysis tools kind of take that personal bias out of the equation. So that's why I like to utilize them. If we go to the daily, let's check it again. Yeah, interesting. Tesla's looking pretty sweet here. It's amazing how strong this market has been, no? Let's check out NVDA. NVDA, such a ripper. NVDA kind of in a very similar spot as Microsoft. Different highs. Microsoft coming into those August 15 highs. NVDA coming into March 30th highs, but the same sort of deal. So you see I got a couple of lines drawn here and a couple of levels that I thought might be important. Originally, I was kind of eyeballing this one for head and shoulders, a bit of a head and shoulders look, kind of similar to that Tesla setup, but opposite, right? Because we lost this low. But they did end up wicking through it and rejecting initially, but man, this thing has just been strong as can be. AI, the AI play seems to be the AI play. Go to Apple here. Take a look at Apple. Let me remove these guys. And Apple, almost a similar spot as well. Maybe lagging by a few days here. But this 173 spot might be kind of interesting. You've got a little teeny gap to fill. Let me throw up the gap detector here real quick. And see, yeah, so you've got a little teeny gap right up here that does need to fill at some point, or that we would expect to fill at some point. This might be an interesting place to to maybe potentially take a quick short bias trade. I guess we'll have to see what happens when you get there, but you do have, you could see, let me move this to the all-time high. You could see you've got a bit of volume there up here around that 172, 173 spot. We might expect price to maybe find a bit of a rejection once it fills that gap. That's kind of interesting. I kind of want to, I'm going to set a quick alert here. This is one thing that I utilize on the platform like crazy. I utilize these alerts. So I've just made a horizontal line, right click on it, say create alert. And actually, let me go to like an hourly here. So I'm going to right click, say create alert. So this is just what we call a dynamic alert. And you can create dynamic alerts on several different kind of settings or setups, or we call them triggers. So you can either choose to be alerted on a breakthrough, a touch, or a bounce. You could choose all three if you want. You could choose just two. You could choose just one. Generally, I'm going to use, for something like this, I'm going to use touch because I don't really care if it breaks through or bounces. I just want to know that price gets to this level, and I don't want to have to be watching this chart all the time. Apple is not a name that I keep a steady eye on. So because of that, I'm going to let the platform do it for me. I'm going to utilize a touch alert, and I'm just going to increase the sensitivity a little bit. The sensitivity is the dollar amount plus or minus the line that the alert fires within. And so because I know that price can, the odds of price like just touching that exact level and then reacting are not the highest. They're not improbable or impossible, but they're just not super high. So what I like to do is I'd like to give a little bit of wiggle room. If price gets pretty close to that line, I want to get an alert to let me know. So in this particular case, I'm going to set it to about $1.50. So if price gets within $1.50 of that 172, 173 spot, I'm going to get an alert to let me know. And I'm going to set my confirmation candle. I'm bringing this down to the smallest time frame possible, which is the 5 minute. That just means that at the close of the 5 minute candle, I'm going to get an alert to let me know. If any 5 minute candle that touches around this area means that price touches or trades through the buffer area but doesn't actually break through it. So I'm only getting a look. If price does end up breaking through this, meaning it opens and closes on opposite sides of the line, I won't get an alert to let me know. But as long as it just touches this area and closes, I'm going to get that alert. So I'm going to title this thing maybe like potential short op Apple. I don't know that it's going to be. It's just going to be kind of like I'm going to use this to just remind me to start watching Apple. You know, it's at a spot that is interesting to me. It's time to put it on my chart and keep an eye on it. I'll set this expiration maybe to, I don't know. I don't think it's going to take that long to get there. If it's going there, I think it probably gets there relatively quickly. I'm going to set it to 40 days. I don't think it'll take that long. And then I'm going to set my triggers to 2. And this just means that multiple 5 minute candles could touch this area and I'll get an alert each time per however many triggers I choose. So this alert will live in the system for either 40 days or 2 triggers, whichever one comes first. It's very possible that if price gets up here, those 2 triggers will come before the 40 days pass. So I say create alert, and now that alert is living in the platform. We could see it over here if we go to our alerts widget and we add it to the sidebar. We could see potential short on Apple. So here's that Apple alert. And you can kind of see all of my alerts preset here. Everything that has expired is down here. So anything that's green up top, these are all active alerts. And then these are my alerts that have expired since I set them. And you know, part of my process most mornings is going to be something very similar to this. You know, I'm going to kind of dig through a handful of charts and kind of see where the eyes are, and then kind of set alerts based off of what I'm seeing. Apple seems like a pretty interesting trade if I can get it up here at this 171 level. Go to AMD. Again, the same, very similar looking setup across all these big tech names, which is interesting to see. You're coming into those old highs, the August highs here. Looks like they front ran them. you had some sellers get excited. But if we come out, if we zoom out and we look at what is above us, we got that point of control. So this is interesting. You've got point of control from all-time highs, price trading just below it. Are we forming a little head and shoulders here? I mean, it kind of looks like one. You have to dig into the smaller time frames to see it, but it is kind of there. I'm going to go to the hourly here and take a look. I'll turn off indicators just for a minute. Whenever I'm kind of looking at, whenever I'm trying to like specifically look at price action, I like to turn indicators off. It just gives a bit easier of a view. So you guys can kind of see probably what I'm seeing here. You know, you got shoulder, head, shoulder. Now, when it comes to what I specifically look at to validate this head and shoulders, me personally, different traders use different things. They think about things different ways. And there is not necessarily a way that's right or wrong. But one thing that I'm always looking for whenever you have a potential head and shoulders setup, what I want to see is the lows in between the first shoulder and the head. I want to see them taken out over on the right side. So for me, what would make this maybe a bit more valid, and I'd be curious to know what y'all's thoughts on this is too, if anybody has any. What I'm looking for is something more like that. I'm looking for price to actually make a new relative low in, compared to the low in between the left shoulder and the head. I'm looking for a proper low. I want it to lose that level. And the fact that it didn't lose that level, the fact that it held that spot, to me, gives this a little bit more strength and kind of invalidates, to some degree, invalidates this this pattern. Now, it did reject kind of right where I would have kind of anticipated it to, somewhere up in here relative to these highs that brought us up. And it did rejected them. So we'll have to kind of be watching that 93 level, probably going to be pretty important for anybody who out there who is an ICT trader. You do have a bunch of these fair value gaps. You got one right here. Actually, let's add a fair value gap indicator. And you'll be able to see them. There you go. So looks pretty similar to our gap detection. Let me turn those off. So here's all of your fair value gaps below. These are spots for anybody who's not super familiar with fair value gaps. Essentially, they're created when they're a 3-candle pattern. So what it's looking at, I'm just going to zoom into this one very specific one right here that it's highlighting. So really what it's doing is it's highlighting this section of this candle. So you're looking at the 3-candle pattern, this candle, and this candle. So you're looking at the high of this candle and the low of this candle right here. And everywhere in between on this particular, in this middle candle, this would be considered your fair value gap. So what we'd be looking for here, or what makes this a fair value gap, is the fact that you have no wick. So you can barely see it there, but I'm trying to draw a wick. Let's do this. There you go. So what you would be looking for this not to be a fair value gap, you'd be looking for a wick on this candle. Let me clone this. And then you'd be looking for a wick on this candle. And be looking for those wicks to clear each other out, right? So if you have a wick and then you have a big body and then you have another wick, so price tested all of the stuff, all of the price in between on this big engulfing bar here. But since we don't have that, since we don't have any wicks in between, you have a wick, a very small one right here, and then you have this wick right here, and you can see that's where the fair value gap is drawn in between those two wicks. So oftentimes what you expect is you expect price to come back and test into this spot at some point. And so that's what the fair value gap's all about. And you see when they come back in and tested a little bit, the gap decreased. They came back and held that area. So these might be some spots to fill like they did here. So they created a fair value gap here. It rejected, it came back, and then it filled that fair value gap on this candle. And ultimately, actually, kind of what it did was it kind of created a new one. So here are your unfilled fair value gaps below. We might look for some of these to come into play. Tammy, what's up? How are you? Awesome. I'm so glad that you are enjoying it. I appreciate that, Tammy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just kind of like I'm just walking y'all through my process. It's not necessarily the right process. It's just a process, trying to give you guys ideas on how to kind of think about how some of these different indicators are used, that sort of stuff. Just kind of like to see what's going on out there as I'm starting my trading day. So I'm going to go over to the Qs here. Now, last week we talked on the Qs. So this is a very clean looking little setup here. It's very similar to everything else that we've just looked at. Obviously, the Qs are going to look usually kind of similar to all of the big mega caps within them, right? So this is your big spot that I would be watching here, is coming into these highs. What are they going to do if they make it up to that 330 level? The negative divergence that we saw is really not playing out. I don't know if you guys read my weekly blog. I do write a weekly blog. Every Friday it gets released on the TrendSpider blog page. And 2 weeks ago, we noted the divergences that were going on across the indices. We had the Qs with this negative divergence setup, meaning it was making new highs while it was making lower highs in RSI. So it was kind of losing a bit of strength into those new highs. Oftentimes, when you see negative divergence, that is a sign that price might be about to reverse. It's not every time. Obviously, this is a good example of that not working. We kind of anticipated a couple weeks ago that maybe this would be reason for the Qs to pause and money to move from tech, out of tech, and into the SPY, and even more so into the IWM, into the small caps. And we can take a look at those two real quick. But so far we haven't really seen that. So far this thing is just powered through, and obviously we're coming into, we're still making new highs in price, and we're still not making a higher high on RSI. So I guess in theory maybe you could do something like this. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the right move, but you could say that we're still seeing that divergence, and at some point that divergence could result in a turnaround. If we go to the SPY, we saw something a little bit different. We saw a hidden bullish divergence. And what we mean by hidden, a hidden bullish divergence is when you're making lower lows in RSI and higher lows in price. So we made those higher lows in price. We held these lows. This is exactly, if you're a trend trader, this is exactly what you want to see. You want to see higher lows. And you've made some higher highs. You got to anticipate that we might come up and make a new high here. Since we held these lows, got to anticipate that they're going to come up in and make new highs. We do have an unfilled gap, 422. You've got a fair value gap up here that could fill at some point, this 440 spot. I don't know how long it'll take to get there, but we are getting up and over the anchored VWAP from the all-time high. This is a big, important level for this index, and it was something to definitely keep an eye on. You've got MACD turning up as well, looking pretty strong here on the SPY. I'm going to go over to IWM. Austin, we'll take a look at it here. Well, we actually did just take a look at it, but I'll go back to it. We could take another look at it. If you had a specific question or anything about it, let me know. About MSFT. So pretty interesting here on IWM. Like I said, we had that negative divergence, or rather, I'm sorry, positive divergence, where we were getting new lows with new lows in price with higher lows in RSI. So strength was building into these new lows. We anticipated that this would yield a reversal. That's exactly what we got here. Really nice move over the past 6 or so sessions. Now maybe we're coming into a bit of a broadening range type of look. Let me do something real quick. I'm going to put up the fractal trend lines. I'm going to go, oh, that's even more interesting too. Coming into those, the trend line off of the previous lows, getting rejected over the past sessions. That's kind of interesting. Not seeing what I'm seeing on it. This is what I mean. You know, sometimes, like I said, you see one thing, the auto analysis sees a different thing. So it's always good to get those differences of opinion. And I'm still kind of learning about broadening ranges, kind of how to draw them manually. I think, and maybe we have some stratters in the audience, I don't know. But my initial thought on it was, oops, let me turn these guys off real quick. My initial thought of it was just kind of, I mean, it's very, very basic, but kind of this guy, right? You have kind of a broadening range to the downside. You have broadening range on the upside as well. Maybe we find a little bit of a rejection spot here. Hard to know for sure. If this thing is able to keep gaining, you know, there are some pretty obvious places where we could be looking. To me, kind of it's in here. This seems like a pretty important line in the sand. And actually, it really kind of has been for, wow, for quite some time. This 186 or so was initially your support back in, February of 2022. We've lost it. We rejected. And we kind of gained it, but we lost it again. And then it stayed resistance for a decent period of time here from September through January of this year. We gained it again, lost it again. You could see how price is respecting it initially when it comes down and tries to bounce and hold. But we did make some new lows here. So this has me quite suspect about how price might react when it gets back up here. My gut says that we might get a bit of a rejection initially. You would maybe anticipate that over time. As time goes on, your VWAP does something like this, right? And maybe price slowly finds its way up there. And maybe they coincide and your VWAP from the all-time highs has, our price has a little bit of trouble getting through that VWAP from the all-time highs. But we need to keep an eye on this. Very, very tricky when it comes to the price action because you made a higher low relative to this. You made a higher low relative to this. So you haven't put in like new lows relative to this September lows, but you did make new lows relative to December. And, you know, you really kind of wanted to see if you were bullish here. You really kind of wanted to see price come in and hold and then bounce. You didn't want to see new lows. So I don't know. Price has a tendency not to lie. If it makes a new low, it's something to be mindful of. Austin, favorite time frame, man. I do my darndest to stay on the 15-minute. It can be very, very difficult to do that, especially if you're wanting to day trade, depending on your day trading rules or depending on, you know, how you trade, what you're trading. It could be very difficult, but there is a lot of noise below 15 minutes. That doesn't mean that it's not valid to look at the minute or the 5 minute or whatever. I will look at the minute, you know, it's a drug, I guess. So yeah, I will look at the minute time frame from time to time, especially if, so what I usually will try to do is I'll try to find areas on the chart that look interesting to me on the hourly, on the daily, and on the 15-minute. Those are kind of my three main time frames that I like to measure off of. And then knowing where those kind of bigger 15-minute is a very big time frame, but knowing where those bigger time frame levels are, once price finds its way to one of those levels, then in a perfect world, I say this, I don't always do this, but in a perfect world, you're going to look on bigger time frames for those really key important levels, and then you're going to go down to smaller time frames when price gets to those levels to see how price is reacting. Being a price action trader, I just spend a lot of time watching price and watching what it does at levels. If it gets to a level of interest that I'm really, really maybe bullish or bearish on, I want to see how price reacts there. Does it immediately catch a bid, or does it immediately fail when it gets to that level? Does it hit that level, stop for a second, and then just keep tapping along that level? Depending on what it does is how I'm going to position myself. And sometimes you want to get out in front of it and you want to set buy or sell orders at very specific levels. And one thing that I am still working on controlling is not setting buy and sell levels at just blindly setting them at specific levels of interest, because you never know what's going to happen. You really got to wait. You got to let price get to a spot, react. They almost always are going to give you like 2 or 3 tests of a spot before a failure, before like the reaction. And it's all about kind of sitting on your hands and letting those tests happen, and trying to trade off of like the second or third one. And what's tricky about doing that for me anyway, and maybe you guys can relate to some degree, what's tricky about doing that for me is sometimes price gets to your spot and it just does exactly what you think it's going to do. And because you're waiting for a second or a third test at a spot, you don't get it because price just did exactly what you wanted it to do. And so that's where it could be tricky, because you want to capture that opportunity, but you also don't want to kill yourself, because price can definitely push right through your spot. And it's happened to me so many times. Like I can't even count how many times that's happened. So I'm really still working on controlling the emotional component, and just like, okay, I got a level that's of interest to me. Let's see what happens when it gets there. Like that Apple spot that we were talking about. So you had asked about Microsoft, and Microsoft does look a lot like the Qs. It looks a lot like Apple. It looks a lot like an NVDA. It's coming into previous highs. In this case, August 15th, 2022 highs. Now, for me, again, as a price action trader, all I see is the fact that we made a new low, right? We made a new low relative to the low that brought us up to those highs. So if that's true, which it is, then you would anticipate a rejection at some point. But it's not doing that yet. And another thing that I see is kind of the same setup, but further back in the chart right here, right? You have a high, you made a new low, and we have not really come back in to test this either. So you got to see what they do here. Are they going to make a new high relative to these August highs? If they do, then what you've essentially done is you have, like if this were one candle, kind of crazy to think about, but if this is one candle, and then everything else within here is another candle, then what do you have? You have an engulfing candle. You've taken out both sides of the range. You took out the lows, and then maybe you take out a high, right? So if you have that, oftentimes when you have one of those big bullish engulfing candles, then maybe what you see next is a little bit of consolidation. So we got to see what they do at this high. Somewhere in here. We got to see what they do when they get here. Do they reject? Do they fail to make a new high? I mean, they're getting right up to where they could potentially reject. So do they reject? Do they push through it and actually make a new high? If they push through it, then that tells you something. You've made a new high that's bullish in trend terms. So then you would be looking somewhere up here, 309, 310. So what do they do when they get to this high? But they've done some. This looks very constructive, right? I mean, you could see a huge change of trend just in the past couple weeks with this anchored VWAP. This is all of your buyers, your average buyer from the all-time highs since November of 2021. Your average buyer has essentially been stuck in this trade and in the red on this trade. Yes, there have been moments for them to get out at break even, but they've really kind of been trapped. But then that all changed. And it did like 2 weeks ago, right? You gained that anchored VWAP. So price actually was able to trade above it. And then for the first time, when it came back into it, it actually held it. If we look back here, it gained it and then lost it. It gained it, it tried to hold it, and then it lost it. Well, now we've gained it, held it, and held it again, and then made a new high. So this anchored VWAP, this 270-230, this could be a pretty decent line in the sand. Bullish above, bearish below. Notice how the volume profile dries up. So this is something that I think a lot of traders are keeping an eye on, because this is true on a lot of names. Notice the volume profile from the all-time high. And notice how that volume reduces. It gets less and less as price gets higher and higher. So not a ton of buyers at these all-time high levels, right? A lot more buyers down here at this 240 spot. You could see the point of controls at 240. That's our sort of the most volume at price has occurred since the all-time highs. So in theory, you do have a bunch of people who own this from higher, who could potentially become sellers, right? But as price gets higher and higher, there's less and less sellers above. So less and less resistance from people who are trapped in this trade. Now, if these volume bars, if you had a big volume bar over here, and I'm just drawing it, but if you had a big volume bar up here, then you might expect if price gets to it, you might expect this to be a pretty heavy level of resistance, right? Because you have a bunch of people who are trapped at these levels. They're going to become sellers when or if price gets back to the break-even spot. But as we get higher and higher, as price gets higher and higher, there's less and less buyers stuck up there. So less and less resistance from old buyers. Doesn't mean that they can't act as resistance. All of these people are potential sellers, right? Because they're all trapped in their trade if they own this thing from any higher than 300 or 286, right? You got to think of them all as potential sellers, at least some of them. At least that's how I would think about it. Think about yourself when you get into a trade and it goes against you to the tune of, if you bought Microsoft at 300 and you've been holding it ever since, you might be down, you might be down 25, 30%. If you're down 25, 30%, and then all of a sudden you see price back to your break-even spot, what do? Do you sell? Because thank God you're back at break-even. Do you continue to hold? I don't know. Depends on the position. Depends on your conviction in the trade. Depends on your investing style, right? Salute from Boston, deep dive. What's up, man? Any indicators on TrendSpider that can help with market maker sentiment? Does the heat map work on crypto? Heat map does work on crypto for sure. Heat map is just looking for any fair value gaps. Let's see. Let me do this. I'm going to switch this gap factor to something a little bit smaller. Yeah, so it looks like you've got this one unfilled below. And there are smaller ones in here. Like there's one here. There's one right here as well. It just depends on your gap factor that you choose. But yeah, you've got a small one down here, 266. 266.66, interesting. I find that those 666 levels have a tendency to be, price has a tendency to react at them, which is kind of weird and kind of creepy. You've got one up here, 316. Yeah, interesting. Any indicators that can help with market maker sentiment? To me, price is the ultimate indicator. Everything is foretold. For me, everything is foretold in price. VWAP is obviously pretty important. Big institutions, anybody who's trading big size is going to be keeping a keen eye on VWAP at all times. And that may be on a day-to-day basis. That's just going to be your standard VWAP, right? Fed liquidity levels. No, we do not have that. I'm not even sure what that means. I've never heard of that before. Maybe you can link me to what that data is exactly, because I've never heard of that. But yeah, with market maker sentiment, I say kind of keep it simple, stupid, right? Like, standard VWAP is going to be your key. You can understand a lot about what's going on at any given time simply by knowing where price is relative to that VWAP. because you know that anybody who's trading like real size is trying to get their trades in as close to that as possible. So where price is relative to it is important. This is where ideas like revision, or I'm sorry, not revision? No, not revision. What's the word I'm looking for? It's early, guys. I haven't had enough coffee today. Mean reversion, where reversion trades come into play. When you see price get extended in one direction or another from the VWAP, when it gets overextended, just generally speaking, I like to look for price more than 1%, either above or below anchored V or just standard VWAP. If price is ever more than 1% above or below VWAP, I'm oftentimes going to be kind of keeping an eye on it for the potential for price to come back in towards it. There you go. 88 market makers are computers. That's true. But those computers are designed by humans, is the thing. And the code that controls the flow is written by humans. Well, maybe they're starting to write it with AI now. I don't know, with prompts. But I think for the most part, people are still doing the big brain thinking there. They're just using the computers to react. So when it just comes to just kind of thinking about how these things should work, that's kind of just something that I keep an eye on. I keep an eye on how far away whatever thing I'm trading is from its daily VWAP. And if it's overextended, and overextended, I would call anything over like 1.5% or 1.25%, 1.25%, 1.5%, something like that. I would start looking for maybe opportunities to take the alternative trade there. If it's trading 1.5% below VWAP, I might start looking for an opportunity for a mean reversion trade back to it. So a long bias trade back to the VWAP. But, you know, sometimes things that become extended can continue to stay extended. So it doesn't always work. You can, though, test it. For example, let's use this. Greater than indicator VWAP by at least 1.5%. And we're going to call this a short trade. Let's just look back 3,000 candles maybe. Actually, no, let's take a bigger look here. So on my entry side, I'm just testing price getting extended to the upside. So price high is greater than the VWAP by at least 1.5%. I'm going to get, that's my entry into a short bias trade. And then let's say price close within range of indicator VWAP by, let's say, 0.2%. So we're going to take a short bias trade when price, when the high reaches greater than 1.5% above the VWAP. And then we're going to get out of that short bias trade when price is within range of it. So within 0.2% of that VWAP. So price is either VWAP has caught up to price or price is pulled back to the VWAP. We're going to run this and see how it works. I don't know how it's going to work. It may not work that well. Yeah, so this has not been a great strategy on Microsoft here. Not too many positions taken, only 11. Obviously, the performance is lousy relative to the asset. So essentially what this is saying is, you know, over the past 4 months, it hasn't been wise to be shorting Microsoft when it's trading in an extended way above its daily VWAP. And that's not a surprise. Microsoft has kind of been going up for the past 4 months, right? Maybe we could take this to a bigger time frame. Let's do the hourly here. So that's going to look back farther. So a lot different of a scenario here, but ultimately a lot different of a set of parameters or a set of data that we're testing. but not a lot different on the results. We've taken more positions. Our win rate is okay. 49% win rate is not bad, but max drawdown's pretty gnarly. We've got a lot of no-go highlighting here, so a lot of issues with this particular strategy. I'd be curious to know. Let's try something here. I'm going to go to something that's only really been gaining for a short period of time. Of course, in this particular instance, it's pretty possible that this just doesn't happen very often. I'm going to reduce the distance of price from the VWAP and see. Yeah, so now I'm testing this on JP Morgan. Same idea, price getting extended from the VWAP. I switched it to 1% instead of 1.5%, so it doesn't have to get so far extended. But same exit criteria. And although we've not taken many positions over the past 4 months here, only 23 positions, obviously the strategy works pretty decent. The performance of the strategy is pretty decent, but the amount of positions is problematic to want to run this on a more regular basis. I'm going to bring the time frame up a little bit and see how that changes things. So not quite as good there. Might try. Yeah, still not so great. Anyway, the point of this is just to say, if I see something that I'm interested in, I might go and test it real quick to see if it has any merit, see if it's worth trading. You could try all different things with your entry and exit criteria as well. You don't necessarily have to wait for price to come back to that VWAP. You could get in on a trade when, price is really extended, and then maybe get out, just after a certain number of candles later, maybe like 5 candles later or something like that. You can try lots of different things, and we would encourage you to do that. Play around with it, try and get it to where you have no-go highlighting. This no-go highlighting is pretty important because it lets you know instantly if there are fundamental flaws about your strategy that are going to make that strategy not be a safe thing to run full time, or a safe thing to run consistently. I'm going to go back into the indices here and just kind of see what's going on. I know the market just opened, 17 minutes ago. I'm curious, does anybody have any questions for me this morning? While I'm kind of just digging around here. Looks like they filled that gap overnight. Kind of interesting that they were not able to make a new high yet. Go to the SPY here and have a look. Pretty much the same look from the SPY, but there wasn't really a gap to fill. Let's look at what's going on with IWM. IWM selling off kind of pretty hard, huh? What do you guys think? Do you think turnaround Tuesday is upon us? Are we going to get a nice move today? Are we extended? What are y'all's thoughts here? No thoughts? You guys don't have any thoughts for me? I want to know what you guys are thinking. I just gave you 45 minutes of what I'm thinking. Where are y'all's heads at? I'm going to look through. I haven't, admittedly, I've been really focused on futures lately, so I haven't even like looked at a ton of what I'm, you know, some of the names that I keep an eye on. ETH looking really pretty strong here, huh? Looking at cryptos now. Bitcoin at a very interesting spot. Check this out. I don't know if any of y'all saw this, but at this big yearly level, this 28.8, this 2021 open that we broke down below, and now we're coming back to test. It's a big important spot here for Bitcoin. Just on a price action, from a price action standpoint, it's a big spot. Qs, actually, if you look at the Qs, very similar, but the Qs managed to get above it. Broke down below that 2021 open, coming back, retested it, and trying to push above it. So Q's a little bit stronger than Bitcoin here. No thoughts, no ideas, no questions. You guys are a quiet bunch this morning. That's okay. SQ almost given back, or almost taken back all of what it lost off of that Hindenburg short report. That's kind of interesting. What else is on this list? Probably a bunch of names that I'm not. Ooh, let's look at energy. Energy had a big day yesterday with those OPEC cuts. So I want to let you guys know tomorrow, I'm not sure if anybody follows the TrendSpider account on Twitter, but if you do, we are doing another space. We have a tendency to do spaces either Tuesday or Wednesday. And tomorrow we're doing a space, a kind of Q2 roundtable discussion. We've got JC Peretz, we've got Brian Lund, we've got Samantha LeDuc, and hopefully some other folks as well are going to be joining us. And we're going to be talking all things Q2, what their expectations are, what new themes they're keeping their eye on and their ear on, kind of where their heads are at, maybe what they're seeing under the hood that your average investor trader isn't seeing. Just generally how they're thinking into Q2. Sometimes these big quarterly changes can bring new themes to the market. We are seeing those divergences into the end of the quarter. How do those divergences end up playing out? Is that something that they're watching? So that's going to be tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern time on Twitter Space. Please join us for that conversation. It should be very good. If you cannot join us, we will be recording it, and you can listen back to it at any time. But it's always a pleasure to talk to those guys. I love talking to everybody who's going to be joining us. They're all super smart. And I love talking to super smart people. We always learn a ton. Actually, here, let me link you guys to that. Let me see here. I need to send it to myself. I'm going to do that. Let me send it to myself really quickly. I'll send it to myself, and then I'll send it to y'all. All right, here we go. There's a link for you guys to the space. Let me also hook you up with this as we are coming up on the end of the hour. So I am going to be getting out of here soon. This is y'all's chance for any last minute questions. If you have any last minute questions for me. Anybody who's not yet a TrendSpider user, if you're interested in becoming a TrendSpider user, you'd like to give the platform a go, here is a 35% discount for you to try. We do offer 7-day free trials, so you really got nothing to lose on at least giving it a go and seeing if it is a good product fit for you. As always, I am always around to answer questions. You can follow me. Oh, you know what? I just realized that is missing from my screen. My name and my Twitter handle, Krutzky Trades, at Krutzky Trades on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you have anytime. My DMs stay open. You're welcome to hit me with what you got. Down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the charts, this contact us button, there's a direct feed into our employee chat room. We have live employees in chat Monday through Sunday. Monday through Friday, about 20 hours per day. Saturday and Sunday, about 8 hours per day. There's almost always someone around who can answer a question for you. If you have a platform-related question, billing-related question, any question, you need help putting together a script for a scanner or for your strategy tester or whatever. If you've got questions, we've got answers. Do not hesitate to reach out to us with those questions. We're happy to assist you however we can. So guys, going once, going twice. Last call for questions. If you don't have any, that's okay. But if you do, hit me with them. What are you guys trading today? Anything in particular that you're keeping your eye on? Tell me about your trading plans for the day. I'm very curious. Q's so strong. Let's check out SPY here. SPY not managing quite to keep up. And IWM making at least a new little short-term low here. Interesting. Now this is an interesting setup. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, y'all. Potential little head and shoulders here on the 15. They did make a new low. So they reject the other shoulder. Wonder if they're going for this gap here. Very interesting. Going once, going twice, guys. What do you think? Nothing? You guys got nothing? You're not trading anything? You're just hanging out, chilling, watching? All right. Well, I guess I'm going to take this as my sign to get on out of here. I do very, very much appreciate you guys hanging out with me this morning. It's been a pleasure to be with you. We will be live, like I said, tomorrow on Twitter Spaces with JC and Brian Lund and Samantha LeDuc, and hopefully some others. I've got some lines out to some other awesome folks, so hopefully we'll be able to get a couple other folks to join us. That's going to be at 12 o'clock Eastern time, and then I will be live again doing this exact same thing on Thursday morning, 9 p.m. Eastern time, talking shop, looking at the charts, answering any questions that you guys have. So this is your chance, your opportunity to come kick it with me in the mornings and talk shop. Happy to talk about whatever you guys want. So again, thank you for being here with me today. I do very much appreciate it. I hope that you guys have a very profitable trading day. Manage your risk. Be careful out there. And take care. And I'll see you guys very soon. All right.